Hey everyone, today we're going to be going over what a customer will see when they uncrate their GO874, parts and accessories that come with it, and the setup procedures to start. Some of the main accessories that you're going to find external to the laser when you open the machine are the water chiller, the exhaust fan, or what they call the blower. We have obviously the laser here, laser tube itself, exhaust tubes, and fittings for the exhaust. Some other things that you'll find in your laser after opening it: some water tubes, air lines, power cords, signal cords, various accessories. Those will be covered in the manual as well. Once the customer has finished opening their GO874 and they finish inventorying everything, make sure they have all their components, the first thing they're going to want to do is put the machine where it's going to live and then level it using the leveling feet. For the sake of this instructional video, we're not going to level our machine with the feet. It is on casters. It allows us to spin the machine around a little more easily to show you what we're doing for setup in the back. The GO874 also includes two effective tables. Like the other lasers, it comes with more of the separated steel style table. Underneath this table has a ribbed table as well, more similar to a plasma style. There is a piece of foam separating these that is a little tricky to see, so the customer will have to remove that once they open their machine. The first step to setting up a GO874 is going to be to unbox the laser tube and get that in place. In order to do that, you need to remove both end caps, remove the top caps for the laser clamps as well, then the laser can be dropped in place. The laser tubes come with foam wrapped on each end of the laser. The next step is to cut the tape free, remove the laser tube from the box, get rid of the foam. I highly recommend using two people to do this. This is the most expensive part of the machine and they're very fragile. One thing to note is you'll see the red cap, that's the positive end. That end goes away from the reflective mirror. The distance between the end of the laser tube and the first mirror isn't critical. Somewhere between an inch to an inch and a half is totally fine. If you look closely, you'll notice a black and a red lead coming into this unit. On the back side of this is a small laser. This is a very low wattage laser. This is used purely for initial alignment. This will get you in the ballpark. The next step is going to be to get the water chiller set up and get the laser tube full of water. Reference the manual for the amount of water needed for each water chiller, and note that some of our lasers, rather than using a designated water chiller, simply use a water pump. When facing the rear of the machine, the right-hand outlet is for the water chiller, the middle outlet is for the air pump, and the left outlet is for the exhaust fan. Take note that the orientation of the outlets is only critical on the GO874. This is because the air pump is operated with a button near the HMI, and the exhaust fan is operated at the start of a program. Unlike the GO874, our medium and small size lasers do not have designated outlets for the accessories included with the machine. These accessories run at all times once power is applied to the machine. The next step to setting up the water chiller is to plug in the alarm. This signal wire from the back of the unit to the machine itself. The signal wire's job is to operate the alarm. If the water chiller runs too low on water, it'll alarm, it'll notify the user that it's low on water. You want to make sure the customers are using distilled water to fill their water cooler. You want to make sure you initially fill the laser well above the full line, almost all the way to the top. This is because some of that water is going to be in the laser tube once we connect the rest of the piping. When you're ready to set up your water chiller, take note of the inlets and outlets available to you. There's an inlet and outlet on the water cooler itself. There's a water in and a water out on the machine itself, and there's a water in and a water out on the laser tube. You want to make sure that your inlet for the water chiller is the outlet for the machine, as well as the outlet for the laser tube. The machine comes pre-piped with tubing running from the barbed fittings up through the machine to connect to the laser tube. Here we have our outlet. The opposite of the end of the machine, we have our water inlet. Here we are connecting the outlet barb fitting on the machine to the outlet fitting on the laser tube itself. And take note for customers calling in, on this machine in particular, the line from the factory that I'm installing right now was actually too short. So we had to swap out one of the provided lines that goes from the water chiller to the machine that was slightly longer to allow us to reach that distance. Here we're showing the water inlet pipe from the barbed fitting on the machine to the water inlet on the laser tube. Once you are ready to begin filling the laser tube with water, plug the water chiller directly into the wall or use an extension cord. The next step, once your water cooler and your laser plumbing lines are all hooked up, is to actually prime the laser tube and fill it with water. We do this by turning the water pump on. Once the water pump is on, the laser tube will begin to fill with water. However, we need to make sure that we evacuate all the air bubbles out of the laser. We do that by lifting the tube and manually manipulating it and rolling it to get any air bubbles to escape. Once all the air is removed from the system, you want to make sure your water outlet is facing in a vertical direction. Now that we have the laser tube full of water and all the air evacuated, we can disconnect our water chiller from our extension cord and we can directly plug it in to the machine's auxiliary power. Now when the machine is powered up, the water chiller itself will power up as well. The next step in the process is to hook the laser to power itself. There's only two ends to the laser, positive and a negative, and they're just done with a Phillips head screwdriver. Next is to install the ground for the laser. Same process as before. Remove the screw and attach the small wire. With the laser tube lightly in the cradles, you can now plug the auxiliary power cord in. Now that the laser is plumbed with the water piping and it's connected to power, we want to reinstall the caps to hold the laser in place. The factory includes a piece of Lexan with a quadrant laser etched onto it. I like to use this piece and tape it to the laser head to use this as a reference. What we're going to do is we're going to shoot that piece of Lexan with the laser to see where the laser beam ends up. When we're ready to pulse the laser beam and check the alignment of the actual laser, this is where we can use the factory alignment laser as a useful tool. We use it purely as a reference. If we shoot the laser beam and it shows that it's in the upper right-hand quadrant, we know we can move the reference laser down into the left to better align the actual laser. You can use the pulse function on the laser head to make a mark on the Lexan where the actual laser beam ends up. You can now see that the reference laser is directly below and slightly to the left of our center mark. Our actual mark made by the laser beam is above and slightly to the right of the center mark. This tells us that our reference laser can move approximately the distance required to make the laser dot end up on the center of the Lexan piece. Now that we're at the fine-tuning portion of our alignment process, one thing to note is the laser is all the way towards us and all the way to the right as you're looking at the machine from the front. The reason for this is this compounds any error that's in the reflective process. That means that in this position, the laser is as accurate as it can be. To begin the trial and error fine-tune process, use the brass knobs to move the alignment laser or the reference laser approximately the amount that you need to move to get the actual laser on center. Once you've adjusted the mirror to approximately align the real laser beam where you think it should end up, repulse the laser and double check your work. Once your laser beam is on center and satisfactory, simply use the lock nuts to lock everything down in place. Now that our reference laser is lined up on the center of the laser head, we can remove our Lexan. Now that the reference laser is lined up with the center of the laser head, we can use it as a reference on our workpiece. You can see that the dot made by the main laser and the reference laser line up in the same spot. At this point, we're ready to hook up the rest of the accessories, mostly being the air pump and the exhaust fan. Now that we have our end covers back on and the laser aligned, we're ready to close it up and we're ready for the next steps. The next step is to remove the air pump and the exhaust fan. So here you can see the exhaust fan and the air pump. The exhaust fan is needed because these lasers produce an immense amount of smoke. So this thing pulls all of that smoke out of our workspace, puts it outside. The air pump forces air through the laser head and helps ensure a clean cut. It gets the smoke and the fumes away from the cut. These air pumps typically come with 2 sets of hoses for 2 different types of machines. This one here is better used on our G0873, whereas this is used for the G0874. The telltale sign for this is the fitting that you'll see on the inlet of the machine over where you input the air to the machine where your water hoses are. Now that we've identified which fitting and which hose we need to use, we can install the quick connect into the air pump. Using the provided hose clamps and tubing, you can now set up the exhaust fan system. When you look under the machine, you're going to see a flange and an open hole. The hose goes onto the flange, the open hole is there for an intake. As you can see, the provided hose isn't very long. The customer will need to note that their machine is going to have to be located close to where they can exhaust their fumes, or the customer will have to buy larger sections of hose. So now we've gone over the basic procedure on how to set up a laser. As we've mentioned throughout the video, each individual laser is different in its own way, but this should be a great starting point to help a customer walk through from start to finish right before they're ready to make cuts.